What if I told you that Leonardo da Vinci's genius had nothing to do with talent? That before he painted the Mona Lisa, before he designed flying machines that wouldn't exist for 400 years, he discovered something the world has completely forgotten. A spiritual law so powerful it can turn exile into oracle, silence into creation, and invisibility into immortality. We've been sold a lie about success. We think it's about hustle, about being seen, about proving ourselves to a world that barely looks up from its phone. But Da Vinci knew different. He was a bastard child, rejected, ignored, invisible, and yet he became immortal, not despite his wounds, but because of them. Here's the paradox nobody wants to hear. Your greatest power doesn't come from your strengths. It comes from the abyss you've been running from, the shadow you've been trying to fix, the fragments of yourself you've labeled as broken. Da Vinci understood this. He didn't wait for permission to be extraordinary. He didn't need validation to know his worth. He found a forgotten law, an ancestral wound turned into ritual, a way of seeing that transforms the inner house of your soul into a forge of creation. And here's the controversial truth. This law works whether you believe in it or not. It's already working in your life right now, beneath the veil of your awareness, in the mythic time between your thoughts. Most people will spend their entire lives waiting to be discovered, waiting for the right moment, waiting until they feel ready. But what if the wait itself is the exile? What if your invisibility isn't punishment but initiation? What if every moment you've felt unseen, every time you've sat in silence wondering if you matter, has been preparing you for something the world desperately needs but doesn't know how to ask for? Da Vinci didn't just create art. He created a mirror for the soul, a remembrance of what's possible when you stop running from the emptiness and start listening to its pulse. This isn't another self-help formula. This is the return to something ancient, something real, something that's been waiting in the forest of your intuition all along. There's something nobody tells you about creation. It doesn't start with inspiration or a sudden burst of genius. It starts in the silence, in what feels like nothing at all. Leonardo didn't wake up one morning with the Mona Lisa fully formed in his mind. He sat with emptiness first, that uncomfortable void where the soul whispers and the ego screams for distraction. That sacred pause, that inner house of stillness, is where the real work begins. Most people run from it because silence feels like death, but it's actually the womb of everything extraordinary. The shadow of our culture tells us that productivity equals worth, that we must always be doing, creating, moving. But there's an ancestral wound in this belief. We've forgotten that the greatest artists, mystics, and visionaries knew how to be empty first. When you sit with the abyss and don't flinch, when you let the fragments of your scattered thoughts settle like dust, something ancient awakens. Da Vinci understood this intuitively. He'd spend months just observing, just being, letting his intuition marinate in the silence. The modern mind calls this laziness. The soul calls it ritual. Think about the last time you truly did nothing. No phone, no podcast, no background noise. Just you and the pulse of your own existence. It's terrifying, isn't it? Because in that mirror of silence, you see yourself without the veil of distraction. You see the parts you've been avoiding, the creative potential you've been smothering with busyness. Da Vinci's genius wasn't in his talent alone. It was in his willingness to return to that inner forest again and again, to trust that emptiness wasn't exile, but invitation. The mythic time between thoughts is where creation breathes. Before Da Vinci became a legend, he was nobody, a bastard child in a world that measured worth by bloodlines and legitimacy. There's a particular kind of wound that comes from being unseen, from knowing your existence is considered less than before you've even spoken your first word. This wasn't just social rejection, it was a spiritual exile, a message written into his bones that said, "You don't belong here." But here's what most people miss: that ancestral wound became his oracle. The hunger to prove his existence, to carve his name into history, wasn't ego, it was soul survival. It was the instinct to say, "I am here and I matter," when the world insisted otherwise. Every genius who was ignored, underestimated, or abandoned carries this same fragment of pain. It's the artist painting alone in a cramped apartment, the writer pouring their heart into words nobody reads, the creator building something beautiful while the world scrolls past. Da Vinci spent years offering his brilliance to patrons who saw him as a mere craftsman, not a visionary. He'd write letters begging for work, listing his skills like a desperate job applicant. Imagine that, the greatest mind of the Renaissance pleading to be noticed. But that invisibility taught him something crucial. When no one sees you, you learn to see yourself. You develop an inner mirror that doesn't need external validation to know your worth. This is where most people get stuck. They wait for the world to recognize them before they recognize themselves. They treat their gifts like secrets, hiding them in the abyss until someone gives them permission to emerge. But Da Vinci didn't wait. He kept creating, kept studying, kept filling notebooks with ideas that wouldn't be understood for centuries. He transformed his trauma into fuel, his exile into a private ritual of excellence. Think about your own life. How many times have you dimmed your light because no one was watching? How many ideas have you buried because they weren't immediately celebrated? The shadow asks, what if your invisibility isn't rejection, but preparation? Da Vinci had a strange habit that people thought was madness. He'd stare at stained walls, cracked plaster, and cloud formations for hours, seeing entire worlds in the chaos. He wasn't escaping reality. He was accessing a deeper layer of it, a mythic time where the soul speaks in symbols and the imagination becomes a bridge between the visible and invisible. Most people think imagination is just fantasy, child's play, something you grow out of. But that's the veil our culture has pulled over one of humanity's most sacred tools. Imagination isn't about making things up, it's about making things real. It's the spiritual technology that every oracle, artist, and visionary has used to pull the future into the present. Before Da Vinci designed his flying machines, he saw them, not with his physical eyes, but with that inner forest of archetypal images that lives in every soul. He understood something profound. The mind that can hold an image with enough clarity and emotional intensity will eventually manifest it in the material world. This isn't New Age fluff, it's ancient wisdom wrapped in Renaissance genius. The pyramids existed in someone's imagination before the first stone was laid. The smartphone you're holding was once just a fragment of thought in an engineer's mind. Every single thing humans have created started as an invisible pulse in the imagination, a remembrance of something that wanted to be born. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most people have abandoned their archetypal imagination. They've let the noise of the world drown out their inner oracle. They scroll through other people's visions instead of cultivating their own. Da Vinci would spend entire days just imagining, just playing with mental images, treating his mind like a laboratory where reality could be tested before it was built. Try this. Close your eyes right now and imagine something you deeply desire. Don't just think about it. See it, feel it, smell it, hear it. Notice how your body responds. That's not fantasy. That's your soul showing you the blueprint. The question isn't whether imagination works, it's whether you trust it enough to follow where it leads. And that trust requires facing your own shadow, the part that says, "Who am I to dream this big?" There's a secret hidden in every fragmented life, every interrupted dream, every moment when the universe says, "Not yet," and you're left standing in the ruins of what you thought was your destiny. Da Vinci's life wasn't a straight line of genius. It was a mosaic of unfinished paintings, abandoned projects, and ideas that died in notebooks because the world wasn't ready. He started more than he completed, dreamed bigger than he could execute, and left behind a trail of what looked like failure. But here's the gift nobody sees. Those fragments weren't mistakes. They were the raw material of hybrid wisdom, a knowledge that only comes when you're forced to live between worlds, between what was and what could be. Most people think wisdom comes from success, from getting it right, from following the path to its logical conclusion. But the deepest knowing, the kind that changes lives, comes from the breaks, the interruptions, the moments when your soul gets shattered and you have to reassemble yourself with pieces that don't quite fit anymore. Da Vinci was illegitimate, which meant he couldn't attend university or study Latin formally. That exclusion forced him to learn differently, to trust his intuition over doctrine, to develop a way of seeing that no institution could teach. Every symbolic rupture in his life, rejection, loss, exile, generated a unique form of knowledge. It's like breaking a bone that heals stronger, or a forest that grows back wilder after a fire. Think about your own interrupted dreams. That relationship that ended before you were ready. That career that collapsed. That version of yourself you had to abandon because life demanded something different. What if those weren't failures but initiations? What if your fragmented experiences are actually creating a wisdom so rare, so specific, that only you can carry it? Da Vinci's unfinished works aren't sad. They're proof that some knowledge is too vast to contain in a single form. The Mona Lisa took him years because he kept seeing deeper layers, new dimensions, more truth to capture. Your life might feel broken, but maybe it's just refusing to be reduced to something simple. Maybe your wound is becoming your oracle, and the gift is already emerging from what you thought was ruined. Here's something that will mess with everything you've been told about balance and wellness. Da Vinci was a disaster. He slept in fragments, ate irregularly, abandoned social norms, and lived in a state of creative chaos that would send any modern therapist into crisis mode. But that imbalance wasn't dysfunction. It was the soul refusing to conform to a world that felt too small. When your spirit is genuinely expansive, when you're carrying visions that don't fit into the tidy boxes of ordinary life, you can't pretend to be balanced. The psychic discomfort, the anxiety, the inner strangeness, these aren't symptoms of failure. They're signs that your soul is too big for the container you've been given, and it's demanding more space. This is the law nobody wants to hear, because we've been sold the myth of Zen equilibrium, of perfect routines and green smoothies and morning affirmations that make everything manageable. But creative spirituality doesn't work that way. It's messy. It demands sacrifices. It pulls you into the abyss at 3 a.m. with an idea that won't let you sleep. Da Vinci would obsess over a single detail for months, ignoring everything else, diving so deep into one question that the rest of his life fell apart. Was that healthy? By conventional standards, absolutely not. Was it necessary? Absolutely yes. Because that level of immersion, that willingness to let the soul consume you, is what transforms ordinary talent into something mythic. It's the difference between dabbling and devotion, between creating content and channeling revelation. Look at your own life right now. Where are you forcing balance when your soul is screaming for imbalance? Where are you trying to be normal when everything inside you wants to explode into something wild and unprecedented? Maybe your anxiety isn't a disorder. Maybe it's spiritual neurodivergence, the intuition telling you that you're meant for something the world doesn't have a job description for yet. Da Vinci didn't fit anywhere. Not in art, not in science, not in any single category. He was the fragment that refused to be whole in the way society demanded. And that refusal, that sacred risk of living at the edge of chaos, is what allowed him to see connections nobody else could see. The forest doesn't grow in straight lines. Neither does genius. Neither do you. Da Vinci had a way of looking at things that was almost supernatural. He could stare at a corpse and see divine geometry, examine a bird's wing and unlock the secrets of flight, watch water flow, and discover principles of hydrodynamics that wouldn't be formally understood for centuries. This wasn't just observation, it was transmutation. He practiced a kind of visual alchemy where his gaze itself became the ritual, the tool that transformed the mundane into the miraculous. Most people look at the world and see what they've been taught to see: categories, labels, the veil of familiarity that keeps everything safe and small. But Da Vinci looked with the eyes of the soul, past the surface, into the pulse of things, where every object contains an oracle and every moment holds mythic time. This is the alchemist archetype, the ability to see essence instead of appearance, to recognize that reality isn't fixed but fluid, waiting to be reimagined by whoever has the courage to look deeply enough. When you truly see something, when you give it your full attention without agenda or judgment, you enter a sacred exchange with it. The thing reveals itself. It shows you its inner house, its hidden structure, the remembrance of what it truly is beneath the name you've given it. Da Vinci would dissect 30 human corpses, not because he was morbid, but because he understood that the human body was a mirror of cosmic design. He'd study the way light hit a face for hours, because he knew that capturing that specific angle could reveal the shadow and soul of an entire person. Mindful attention wasn't a relaxation technique for him. It was a spiritual technology, a way of participating in creation itself. Here's what this means for you. Everything you're looking at right now is either dead or alive, depending on how you see it. Your job, your relationships, your daily routines, they're either mechanical repetitions or potential sites of transformation. The difference isn't in the things themselves, it's in the quality of your gaze. When was the last time you really looked at someone you love, not glancing but seeing, the way Da Vinci would study a subject? When did you last observe your own thoughts with that same alchemical attention, noticing the patterns, the fragments, the way your inner forest grows and changes? The world doesn't need you to do more, it needs you to see more, because whoever truly sees has the power to change the form of what they're witnessing. That's not metaphor. That's the forgotten law of perception as ritual, attention as magic, the gaze that turns everything it touches into gold. Here's the emotional truth that nobody wants to face. Da Vinci spent most of his life unknown, unappreciated, carrying gifts the world didn't know how to name. He'd pour his soul into a painting, and patrons would complain it took too long. He'd design revolutionary machines, and they'd gather dust in his notebooks. He'd offer his brilliance, and people would see him as odd, difficult, too slow, too strange. The archetypal suffering of having a gift the world cannot see is a specific kind of exile, a loneliness that lives in the marrow. It's not just about lacking fame, it's about carrying something sacred inside you and watching the world scroll past it, indifferent, unable to recognize what you're offering because it doesn't fit their categories of value. This wound lives in every artist who creates in obscurity, every visionary dismissed as impractical, every soul who knows they have something important to say but can't find anyone who'll truly listen. Da Vinci would write backwards in his notebooks, partially to protect his ideas, but maybe also because he'd internalized that the world reads him backwards anyway, misunderstanding his intentions, reducing his depth to surface accomplishments. How do you face that? How do you keep creating when recognition never comes, when your name means nothing, when you die without knowing your work will matter centuries later? The answer isn't in finding validation, it's in developing a relationship with your gift that doesn't depend on external mirrors. It's in treating your creative work as ritual, as a private conversation between your soul and the invisible, as a form of prayer that doesn't need an audience to be sacred. Ask yourself this: what would you create if you knew for certain that nobody would ever see it, that you'd never be famous, never be understood in your lifetime? Would you still do the work? Da Vinci did. He filled over 13,000 pages with drawings, notes, observations, most of which weren't discovered until after his death. He didn't create for applause. He created because his soul demanded it, because the act itself was the answer to his exile. That's the symbolic answer to the wound of unrecognition. You stop waiting for the world to see you, and you start seeing yourself. You become your own oracle. You recognize the gold in your own hands, even when everyone else sees mud. And somehow, mysteriously, when you stop needing recognition, when you make your work an offering to the abyss rather than a bid for attention, that's when the return begins. Not always in your lifetime, but always in truth. Da Vinci didn't have a roadmap. There was no how to become a Renaissance genius guide, no mentor who laid out the steps, no guarantee that any of his wild experiments would lead anywhere. He walked into the unknown daily, risking everything: his reputation, his time, his sanity, on ideas that had never been tested. He'd design a helicopter in an era of horse-drawn carts. He'd study anatomy when dissection was controversial and dangerous. He'd pursue questions that had no practical application, no immediate payoff, no promise of return. This is the law of sacred risk. The path doesn't reveal itself to those who wait for certainty. It only shows up for those who take the first step into the fog, trusting that the forest will open as they walk, that the ritual of moving forward is what creates the road beneath their feet. Most people never start because they're waiting for permission, for a sign, for proof that it will work before they invest their heart. But creative spirituality doesn't operate on those terms. It demands symbolic risk, the courage to err, to fail publicly, to look foolish in the face of mystery. Da Vinci proposed building a bridge across the Golden Horn that was considered impossible. He painted the Last Supper using an experimental technique that started deteriorating almost immediately. He failed constantly, spectacularly, and kept going because he understood something crucial. The mystery doesn't owe you safety. It only responds to those willing to meet it on its own terms, in the abyss where nothing is guaranteed, except the alchemical transformation that happens when you stop playing it safe. Think about what you're not doing right now, because you're afraid of the risk, that business idea, that creative project, that conversation you need to have, that version of yourself you keep glimpsing in the mirror of your intuition, but dismiss as unrealistic. What if the very act of risking is the ritual? What if your soul doesn't grow through comfort, but through the courageous leap into the unknown, into the pulse of uncertainty where real change happens? Da Vinci forged his own destiny, not by following a model, but by inventing one as he went, making it up, trusting his inner oracle more than external rules. There was no model for him. And there's no model for you either, not really. Your path is unprecedented, specific to your soul's blueprint, and it will only reveal itself when you stop waiting and start walking. The question isn't whether you'll succeed, it's whether you'll trust the mystery enough to take the sacred risk of finding out. So here's what most people miss about Da Vinci's life. The transformation didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It happened in the daily choice to keep creating when no one was watching, to keep trusting his inner oracle when the world called him strange, to keep risking everything on visions that existed only in the mythic time of his imagination. And that same choice is sitting in front of you right now, not as some distant possibility, but as an immediate invitation. The question isn't whether you have what it takes. You do. The question is whether you're willing to stop waiting for perfect conditions and start working with the fragments you already have. Think about the interrupted dream that's been haunting you, the one you pushed aside because it didn't make practical sense or because someone told you it wasn't realistic. What if that's not a distraction but a direction? What if your soul has been trying to get your attention through that very thing and you've been dismissing it as irrelevant? Da Vinci's flying machines were irrelevant to his era. His anatomical studies had no immediate application. His way of seeing was centuries ahead of his time. But he didn't wait for the world to catch up. He created from the abyss anyway, trusting that the act of creation itself was the ritual, the proof, the sacred risk that would eventually reveal its purpose. And here's something that connects directly to what we're talking about. Before Da Vinci could create from emptiness, he had to learn to withdraw his energy from the noise, from the people who couldn't see him, from the world's demands that he be someone smaller. This is exactly what Jung understood centuries later. And if you haven't watched it yet, I need you to see the previous video on this channel. When you withdraw your energy, their true nature appears. Jung knew this, because that withdrawal, that sacred exile from external validation, is what creates the inner house where genius can actually grow. Da Vinci practiced this instinctively, pulling his attention away from rejection and redirecting it into his notebooks, his visions, his private rituals. That video will show you exactly how to do the same thing, how to stop feeding your energy to people and situations that drain you, and how that very act reveals who's real and what's true in your life. Here's what I want you to understand. Your genius isn't waiting for you to figure everything out. It's waiting for you to take one small step into the unknown, to practice alchemical attention on something you've been overlooking, to transmute one wound into wisdom this week. Not a massive life overhaul, just one moment where you choose trust over fear, where you let your intuition lead instead of your anxiety, where you treat your creative impulse as an oracle rather than a distraction. Maybe it's spending 30 minutes in silence without your phone, really looking at something in nature the way Da Vinci would. Maybe it's starting that project you've been postponing. Maybe it's withdrawing your energy from the people who've been invisible witnesses to your genius and redirecting it into the creative ritual that's been calling you. So let me be direct with you. What's one thing you're going to do differently this week because of what you've learned here? Comment below and make it real by speaking it into existence. And if you're serious about this path, if you want to keep exploring these forgotten laws that turn ordinary lives into extraordinary legacies, then subscribe to this channel and activate notifications. Right after this, go watch When You Withdraw Your Energy, Their True Nature Appears. Because it's the missing piece to everything we've talked about today. It's how you create the space for your soul to finally speak. Your inner house is calling. The pulse of your genius is waiting. And the only question that matters is, will you answer?